I still remember the cold, gray morning when I returned to Burling Grove, Colorado, to attend my grandfather's funeral. The air felt thinner there, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath. His old stone mansion stood on the hill above the town, the same house where I spent countless summers running through the echoing hallways, pretending I was a princess guarding a secret kingdom. But that day, as the wind pressed against the windows and the sky threatened snow, the house didn't feel like a kingdom anymore. It felt like a stranger, like a memory I wasn't sure belonged to me. Inside, my family talked in quiet clusters, dressed in black, but their eyes shimmered with something that didn't look like grief. My Uncle Mason was the first to greet me, though greet might be too kind a word. He nodded at me stiffly, his attention already drifting back to a conversation with my parents about business matters. That phrase always meant money with my family. Even here, even today, they couldn't focus on anything else. My father looked up only once to acknowledge me with a tight, tired expression that never quite felt like concern. My mother gave me a brief hug, but quickly pulled back, as if even that small gesture was too much effort. We moved into the library for the reading of the will. That room had once been my favorite, a warm space filled with books, leather chairs, and a fireplace that made the whole place smell like cedar and thyme. Today, though, the atmosphere was different. The tension was so sharp it felt like I could slice my palm on it. The family lawyer, Mr. Alden, sat behind my grandfather's wide mahogany desk, adjusting his glasses as everyone took their seats. My family leaned forward eagerly, and for a moment, I felt like an outsider watching strangers scramble for scraps. I sat near the window, the only place in the room where I could breathe easily. I kept my eyes on the snow beginning to fall outside, flakes drifting lazily down, as if they had more time than any of us. "Let's begin," Mr. Alden said, clearing his throat. He opened the folder with a soft rustle that seemed to electrify the room. My Uncle Mason was the first to receive something, the mansion on the hill. His eyes gleamed with triumph. My Aunt Lydia received the Vineyard Estate in Greenfall, Virginia, a property she had secretly wanted for years. My sister Laura got the superyacht anchored near Newport, Rhode Island, and she gasped so loudly the whole room turned to look at her. My parents were gifted the luxury cars, 3 of them, and most importantly, control of the company valued at $678 million. Their expressions softened with satisfaction, like winning a game they believed they were always meant to win. Then Mr. Alden paused. He looked at the remaining envelope in his hands. "And for Christina," he said, almost hesitating. "Your grandfather left this." He held out a small cream-colored envelope. It looked almost fragile compared to the towering stacks of documents and deeds the others had received. I walked up to him, my heartbeat quickening with confusion more than excitement. My parents watched me with amusement, real amusement, as if they already knew I would be disappointed. I opened the envelope gently. Inside was a single plane ticket. One way. To Hawaii. A soft laugh escaped my mother. My father leaned back in his chair and shook his head. "He never cared about you, Christina. You were always the afterthought. I told you not to get your hopes up." Their words landed like stones in my chest. For a moment, I felt small again, like the girl who used to hide in the corner of the mansion's music room so she wouldn't accidentally interrupt the grown-ups. I stared at the ticket. A flimsy slip of paper. No note. No explanation. It would have been easy to crumble it in my hand and walk out. To accept that my family had been right all along, that my grandfather valued everyone else more than me. But something held me back. Something subtle, almost invisible. My grandfather wasn't careless. He didn't do things without intention. He was a man who built his life with precision, from his businesses across America to his friendships in Europe, to the countless lessons he whispered to me during summers we spent exploring the old greenhouse behind his home. "Pay attention to what others overlook," he used to tell me. "The truth is never loud." Those words came back to me as I looked at that ticket. It didn't feel meaningless. It felt like a puzzle, and he had always trusted me with his puzzles. My sister walked past me, brushing my arm with a smirk. "Well, I hope Hawaii at least gives you a nice tan," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. My parents followed behind her, already discussing financial plans, barely glancing in my direction. And yet, as their voices faded down the hallway, I felt something unexpected rising inside me, not sadness or anger, but a stirring sense of purpose. Maybe even destiny. Whether my grandfather's choice hurt me or protected me, I didn't know. All I knew was that the ticket wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something that didn't belong to them. Something that belonged only to me. Later that night, after the funeral guests had gone and the house had grown quiet, I sat alone in one of the upstairs rooms overlooking the town. Snow had covered the rooftops, making Burling Rove look almost peaceful again. I held the ticket in my hands, smoothing the edges. I thought about the years I had spent feeling like an outsider in my own family, like a piece that never fit the puzzle no matter how hard I tried. Maybe Hawaii would finally give me answers my family never could. So I packed my bag. Not because I felt brave, but because curiosity tugged at me harder than fear. I booked a flight for the next morning. And as I zipped up my suitcase, I whispered quietly to the empty room, "Grandfather, I hope you know what you're doing." When I left the mansion at dawn, the sky was pale pink with the promise of a new day. I took one last look at the house on the hill. The house filled with memories both sweet and painful, and then I turned away. I didn't know what waited for me in Hawaii. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't the afterthought. Not anymore. When my plane touched down in Hawaii the next morning, the sun was just beginning to rise over the coastline, painting the sky in streaks of coral and amber. The warmth hit me the moment I stepped through the airport doors, so different from the cold air I had left behind in Colorado. For a moment, I stood still, letting the heat soak into my skin, trying to quiet the storm inside me. I kept replaying the scene from the reading of the will, my family's gleaming eyes, their smirks, the cruel remarks that had sliced at me with more precision than any blade. I told myself I had come here to find answers, but in truth, I wasn't sure what I expected to find. All I had was the plane ticket and the weight of my grandfather's silence. I pulled my small suitcase behind me as I moved through the terminal, scanning the crowd for something, anything, that looked like a sign. That's when I saw him. A man in a black suit stood near the exit, holding a white placard. At first, I didn't notice the name on it. I was too distracted by the stillness of him, the way he held himself like someone accustomed to order, discipline, and purpose. Then I froze. The placard read, "Miss Christina, the king awaits you." My eyebrows shot up on instinct. The king? I stared at the man, half expecting him to lower the sign or reveal it was some kind of mistake. But he didn't. Instead, he inclined his head toward me, as if he had known all along that I would stop in front of him. "Miss Christina?" he asked, his voice smooth and respectful. "Yes," I said, my voice sounding much smaller than I intended. "Please come with me. I've been instructed to take you to the estate." "The estate?" I repeated, confused. "What estate? Who are you?" "My name is Rowan," he said. "I work for Mr. Harrington. He has been expecting you." I didn't recognize the name, but something about Rowan's tone made it clear that this was not a request I could casually dismiss. Without another word, he took my suitcase with careful, almost formal care and guided me toward the parking structure. I followed him numbly, unsure whether I should be cautious or hopeful. Outside, a sleek black car waited, long, polished, and elegant, the kind of vehicle that turned heads without trying. Rowan opened the back door for me. I hesitated only for a heartbeat before sliding inside. A soft scent of leather and sandalwood greeted me, instantly calming my nerves. Rowan started the engine and began driving away from the airport, away from the bustling city, and toward the quieter edge of the island. The farther we drove, the more the scenery changed. Shops and traffic lights gave way to winding roads lined with towering palm trees. The air smelled like salt, flowers, and something wild. I kept my eyes fixed on the landscape, trying to guess where we were going. Rowan didn't speak unless I asked something, and even then, his answers were minimal. "Mr. Harrington," I finally said, breaking the silence. "Who is he?" Rowan glanced at me through the rear-view mirror. He was one of your grandfather's closest friends. Some say he was more like a brother to him. I blinked in surprise. My grandfather had never spoken much about friends. Certainly not ones who lived on lavish Hawaiian estates and sent chauffeurs to greet me like I was royalty. And why is he waiting for me? You'll understand soon, Rowan replied, his voice gentle yet firm. The rest of the ride passed in thoughtful silence. Eventually, we reached a private road that curved along a cliffside overlooking the sparkling ocean. When the iron gates appeared ahead of us, I felt my breath catch. They stood at least 12 feet tall, crafted from dark metal with intricate, swirling designs that reminded me of vines twisting toward the sky. Beyond them, I caught glimpses of a sprawling estate, a bright stone mansion that looked almost too grand to be real. Rowan pressed a button, and the gates opened slowly with a low, solemn groan, as if welcoming me into a world I had not known I was meant to enter. As we drove deeper onto the property, the details became clearer. Wide gardens filled with marble fountains, pathways lined with orchids and tropical flowers I couldn't name, a large courtyard paved with pale European stone. Everything looked deliberately designed yet effortlessly natural, like nature and architecture had shaken hands and decided to build something spectacular together. When the car finally came to stop in front of the mansion's entrance, I felt my heart thump against my ribs. A man stood waiting at the top of the steps. He was tall, taller than Rowan, and carried himself with the commanding elegance of someone who understood power but didn't need to flaunt it. His hair was silver, neatly combed back, and his eyes were a piercing ice blue. A cream-colored suit fit him perfectly, giving him the appearance of someone who had spent a lifetime moving through rooms where important decisions were made. Rowan stepped out, opened my door, and helped me out of the car. The man on the steps began descending toward us with a slow, dignified stride. When he reached me, he extended his hand. "Christina," he said, his voice warm and deep. "I've been waiting a very long time to meet you." I stared at him, unsure what to say. "You know who I am?" "Very well," he replied. "My name is Alexander Harrington, and I knew your grandfather better than almost anyone alive." Hearing my grandfather's name in a place like this, from a man like him, made my chest tighten. "Why am I here?" Alexander smiled softly, as if he had expected the question. "Because your grandfather trusted you with something extraordinary, and the time has come for you to learn the truth." He gestured toward the mansion's wide double doors. "Come inside, Christina. Everything you believed about your inheritance, about your family, is only a fraction of the real story." I followed him inside, feeling the weight of something monumental closing in around me. The foyer alone was bigger than any room I had ever seen, with ceilings that stretched high enough to hold echoes and sunlight streaming through windows that framed the ocean like moving artwork. We walked down a long corridor into a private study filled with European antiques and shelves lined with leather-bound ledgers. On the desk lay thick folders, sealed envelopes, keys, and documents arranged with surgical precision. Alexander turned to me with an expression I didn't yet understand, something between pride and quiet sadness. "Your grandfather left almost his entire real fortune under my care," he said. "A hidden empire worth nearly $7.8 billion. And all of it, every company, every property, every account, is yours, Christina." The room spun softly. I grabbed the edge of the desk to steady myself. Why me?" Alexander stepped closer, his gaze firm but kind. "Because he knew your heart. And he knew that you would not be corrupted by what others would kill to possess. You were always his choice." As the words settled over me, something inside me shifted. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the overlooked granddaughter. I felt seen, valued, chosen. And as I stood there in that vast Hawaiian estate, I realized that my journey had only just begun. The first few days after Alexander revealed the truth of my inheritance passed in a kind of dreamlike haze. I stayed in a smaller villa on the estate, an elegant home with white shutters, a soft blue roof, and walls that glowed warm in the Hawaiian sun. Every morning, I woke up to the sound of the ocean brushing against the shore, its rhythm steady and calming, as if urging me to breathe. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was fighting to exist. I felt chosen.
Seen.
Protected. Alexander came by often during those days, guiding me through documents, investments, and histories my grandfather had kept hidden from everyone else. Each folder he handed me felt heavier than the last. Not because of the wealth in them, but because of the trust behind it. One afternoon, while we sat at a long oak table reviewing a list of properties in Kingswell, Virginia, and Northbury, England, I paused and looked up at him. "Why didn't you tell them?" I asked. "Why hide everything from my family?" Alexander set down his pen and leaned back slightly. His expression softened, the way it always did when he spoke about my grandfather. Because he knew what they would do with such power. They loved appearances, not legacy. Image, not truth. He wanted his real empire protected, not paraded. I nodded, feeling a sting in my chest, not of pain, but understanding. In some strange way, it made sense. My family had always valued things more than people. And I, the one who never fit into their world, had been the only one my grandfather trusted with everything. It was ironic, but it was also poetic. But peace never lasts long in my life. On the morning of the 5th day, everything changed. I stepped outside onto the villa's balcony to drink my usual coconut coffee, letting the warm breeze push through my hair. The estate was quiet, the kind of quiet that made you love breathing. Then I heard something distant shouting. Not the staff. Not the waves. Human voices. I walked to the edge of the balcony and looked toward the main gates. I saw 3 figures, 2 women, 1 man, pressed against the iron bars like prisoners desperate for escape. But these weren't prisoners. It was my family. My mother's hair, perfectly styled despite the heat. My father's posture stiff with pride. My sister Laura clutching her handbag like someone had threatened to steal it. My heart dropped into my stomach. For a moment, I simply stared at them. The scene looked unreal, like something pulled from a fever dream. They were calling my name, shouting it actually, as though they had transformed overnight into a loving, supportive family. "Christina." "Sweetheart," my mother called out, lifting her sunglasses to wipe away non-existent tears. "We came all this way to see you." My father cupped his hands around his mouth. "We just want to talk." "Let us in, honey." "Honey." "Sweetheart." Words they had never used with me before. Not once. Not when I was a child. Not when I was a teenager struggling to feel seen. Not when they ignored me at every family holiday. But now that I supposedly held billions, suddenly I was worth shouting for. I felt something tighten inside me. Not sadness, but clarity, sharp and bright. I walked down the path toward the gates. Rowan and 2 guards were already standing by, waiting for instructions. Alexander must have told them to keep my family outside until I decided otherwise. As I reached the gate, my mother's face lit up like she had just seen the sun for the first time. "Oh, darling," she exclaimed, stretching her hand through the bars.
"We were so worried about you."
"Why didn't you tell us you were here?" I didn't touch her hand. I didn't move any closer. My father stepped forward. "We want to fix things. Let's just talk inside. Privately." I stared at him, searching for even a flicker of genuine concern. I found none. His eyes were calculating, studying me like I was a vault waiting to be cracked open. Laura, meanwhile, kept adjusting her sunglasses, glancing around the estate as if she couldn't wait to explore everything she thought she would soon own. "I know why you're here," I said finally, my voice steady even though my pulse raced. "You didn't care when you thought I had nothing. You didn't care when you humiliated me at the will reading. Now suddenly you want to fix things." My mother's face faltered for a moment, just a moment. Then she plastered on a smile again. "You misunderstood us. We were just stressed. Upset. Your grandfather was important to all of us." "Right," I said. "Important enough for you to forget I existed?" Her mouth opened, but no words came out. And just then, Alexander appeared beside me, his presence calm but powerful. He placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Christina," he murmured, and the clothes they were wearing. The old building had been falling apart, and they had struggled to find donors for years. When I visited the newly rebuilt center months later, Evelyn hugged me with tears in her eyes and whispered, "You didn't just save a building. You saved futures." I walked out of that shelter with a feeling I had never experienced before, a warm, steady sense of purpose that settled into my chest and stayed there. It was the kind of purpose no inheritance could buy. Despite everything I accomplished, my family still tried to reach me. My phone lit up with their calls more times than I care to remember. Messages dripping with sudden concern, fabricated memories, and pleas for forgiveness that felt more like transactions than healing. My mother left long voicemails, her voice trembling with desperation as she insisted that family should stick together. My father sent long emails filled with polished arguments about unity, honor, and legacy, as though he were negotiating a business deal rather than apologizing to his daughter. Laura sent me messages every few weeks, each one more dramatic than the last. "You're destroying the family with this distance," she wrote once, "and you'll regret it when it's too late." But each time, I reminded myself of the truth. They weren't reaching out because they loved me. They were reaching out because they wanted access to what I had been given. And I wasn't willing to sacrifice my peace, or my grandfather's trust, just to make them feel comfortable again. Boundaries became my new form of survival. I blocked their numbers, changed my email, informed security at all three estates that no member of my family was ever to be allowed in without my permission. It wasn't cruelty, it was self-defense. And when I finally accepted that, I felt lighter than I ever had. Alexander became something like a mentor to me during that time. We would have long talks on the terrace of the Hawaiian mansion, talks about legacy, courage, and the kind of person my grandfather believed I could become. Sometimes, he told me stories from decades ago, describing the wild adventures he and my grandfather had taken across Europe and the deals they made that shaped entire industries. Each story made me feel closer to the grandfather I thought I had lost, as though a missing part of him was being returned to me piece by piece. One evening, after a long day of reviewing investment portfolios and discussing philanthropic plans, I stood on the balcony overlooking the glowing Hawaiian sunset. The sky was painted in gold and rose, and the waves below shimmered as if holding 1,000 tiny stars. I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply, letting the warmth settle over me like a soft blanket. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking backward. I wasn't replaying the hurt, the loneliness, or the mistakes of others. I wasn't waiting for my family to change or hoping for acceptance that was never going to come. Instead, I was looking forward, with strength, with confidence, and with a sense of belonging I found within myself, not from anyone else. I whispered a quiet thank you into the breeze. Thank you to my grandfather for believing I deserved more, even when my own parents didn't. Thank you to myself for stepping away from a life that crushed me. Thank you to the universe for giving me the courage to start over. My name is Christina, and my life didn't begin with billions. It began the day I chose myself.